So I'm going to keep this on the draw. Spell Snare could catch us back up because it's even better on the draw than on the play, just because answering a 2-mana card can be super important. And there's an Aether Vial. Okay. So we could be up against a deck like Hatebears. I'm going to go Seachrome Coast, pass, and hold up Spell Snare. The other option would be to suspend Ancestral Vision here. But I think countering something like a Thalia is super important. There it is. Okay, great. So I'm going to go for the Spell Snare. If that Thalia had entered play, it would have just been a big clock, and it would have made all of our spells a lot worse. So now we can take the time to suspend the Ancestral Vision, pass the turn, have a little bit more breathing room. So our opponent's just passing here, it looks like. So some of these decks have Spell Quellers in them. That's definitely a card to be thinking about. So we drew Seachrome Coast. We could play the Detention Sphere, even though it might get Spell Quellered. I think we probably should try to get the Vial off the board. And if our opponent has the Spell Queller, we can interact with it later with potentially a Cryptic command or a removal spell we draw. So it looks like our opponent is responding to this Detention Sphere with a Leonin Arbiter. That's kind of weird because you would think that our opponent would wait until we were choosing our targets with the sphere before activating the vial. Now we have the option to go after the Arbiter if we want to. So I'm not sure if our opponent was trying to level us in a way by putting this into play first. But it is definitely a threat. So I'm going to go for this Leonin Arbiter with the Detention Sphere. I think either that was a misstep by our opponent or they were trying to bait. It was a bait card and we just took the bait by getting rid of it. But normally with this deck, I want to make the decision that's preserving our life total because the late game should be favorable with cards like Ancestral Vision. We have big spells in our hand like Jace and Cryptic Command. If our opponent's just passing the turn, still thinking, okay, there could be a Spell Queller in our opponent's hand. So now with the Leonin Arbiter out of play, we're free to fetch with this Flooded Strand. And I'm going to go for the Jace. If our opponent does Spell Queller it, then we can live with that. I think we would rather have a card under a Spell Queller, and then we can figure it out from there. So, alright, there's the Spell Queller. So, the Blue-White Hatebears deck typically does play that card. There it is. And we're still left with this Cryptic command we can use, but our opponent's smartly going to Tech Edge away our Celestial Colonnade, so we no longer have access to that card. So our opponent has another Leonin Arbiter. What we'd really like is a Supreme Verdict to just sweep away these creatures, but if we're able to bounce the Spellcaller and get our Jace back, that would be good. But here's a Supreme Verdict. Just as soon as I called for it, there it is. So I'm going to go ahead and cast it. We'll see if our opponent has another Spellcaller or not. Now, if our opponent does have another Spellcaller, then they would be able to exile the Supreme Verdict, because it's not actually Spellcaller doesn't actually counter the spell. So, all right, we have the Jace. I'm going to plus it because our opponent might be able to vial in a 3-mana card, and I don't want the Jace to just immediately die. So I like plussing it this turn, potentially minusing it on the following turn. But I think we're in good shape here. Our opponent seems to be running out of gas a little bit. A little bit land heavy, and we've still got this Ancestral Vision. So we're going to get to draw 3 here, which is always great. The turn Ancestral Vision resolves is often the turn where you are able to turn the corner a little bit. And it looks like our opponent realizes that. We have double Cryptic, Serum Vision, Spreading Seas, and we're in a pretty commanding position, so our opponent's just going to concede. Okay. So, sideboarding for this matchup. Core Firewalker, for sure not. Stony Silence shuts down Aether Vial, but doesn't shut down anything else in the deck. Porphyr Nodes can get rid of some of the creatures that our opponent presents, so that could be useful to us. I actually like Porphyr Nodes more than Condemn in the matchup, so I think I want the Porphyr Nodes for sure. I think we want that card. Dispel and Negate don't seem super necessary. I could see Vendilion Click. It blocks Spellcaller pretty well. Mana Leak and Cryptic Command are pretty vulnerable in this matchup because of Vial. Counterspells are traditionally not that good against Vial. So I like the V-Clicks and the Porphyr Nodes. And in terms of what we take out, I think we're okay with taking out some of the Blessed Alliance Condemn type stuff. And then also some of the mana leaks seem pretty marginal as well. So this seems reasonable. So let's go with this for game 2. So I'm going to keep this for sure. We have Serum Visions into a Spreading Seas. Spreading Seas isn't a great card in the matchup. Our opponent's mana is pretty good, but still fine. So we could fetch here. I'm just going to play the Seacrum Coast out and cast the Serum Visions. And so we've got a couple of options here. I think we want the other Serum Visions, and probably not the Seacrum Coast. We've got 3 lands, which is basically enough to operate. And we're pretty likely to draw more lands off of these Spreading Seas or in the future in general. So it looks like our opponent has a very similar mana base to ours. So we could Spreading Seas something this turn. We could also just play the Porphyr Nodes. And I think that makes a reasonable amount of sense to play the Porphyr Nodes this turn. And to also play the Serum Vision. So I'm going to play out the island, actually. And then Serum Visions here. Definitely more Spreading Seas than we would like. The Condemn also isn't super appealing. It's okay. don't think we need the island. The condemn. I'm going to put the condemn on top, but I'm not super happy about doing it, basically. And then play out the porphyr nodes. So if we're able to nodes away the arbiter, that's going to free up this flooded strand so that we can sacrifice that. And our opponent is incentivized not to play another creature here. So get rid of the arbiter, and then the porphyr nodes is going to get sacrificed. So now we can go for a spreading seas, I think. Sometimes these decks have Eldrazi's in them for the colorless, so I think I'm just going to go for the Attica Waste. And by having the porphyr nodes in play, we were able to stop our opponent from casting a creature last turn, which is going to buy us a lot of time. This turn, this game, what we do not have is an Ancestral Vision, which would be good. Just to be able to have some inevitability in the game. We don't have that clear card advantage engine. So our opponent's going for Flicker Wisp, perhaps. Yeah, so it's going to be on that Attica Waste. So we're almost just using the Spreading Seas as cyclers, which isn't great, but it's going to dig us towards some of our business spells. And it could be that our opponent has a card like Eldrazi Displacer or Thought-Knot Seer. Although now that our opponent has the Tech Edge, the Spreading Seas is still not that relevant. But I still think we want to use them to simply to draw some cards. So I'm gonna go after our opponent's blue sources now with the Spreading Seas. And I like cracking the Flooded Strand just in case our opponent plays a Leonin Arbiter. So I'm going to do that. So now we've gone after two of our opponent's white sources. I don't know why I said blue, because of course we're making these lands into islands. And it looks like our opponent's considering, and it looks like they are going to go ahead go for a Tech Edge. So that's fine. We were able to draw some cards, found that Ancestral Vision, and still have a bunch of removal. And as you can see, it didn't really matter too much what we targeted with the Spreading Seas. Could have gone after the Tech Edge, but not actually. We didn't really need the mana, at least at that point. We're okay to operate off of 4 lands. So I'm going to go for suspending the Ancestral here and just passing the turn. We have this Condemn, which we can use to get rid of the Flicker Wisp, potentially. But it looks like our opponent has an end of turn play. So here's a Restoration Angel. That's pretty good, actually. So that's going to flicker out the Flicker Wisp. And probably just ends up meaning one of our spreading seas gets fallen off, although it looks like instead our opponent went for a land of ours, which is an interesting choice. So flickered out the Seachrome coast. And now our opponent has a Ghost Quarter. I think we want to take this and play towards Supreme Verdict, but it's definitely a little bit risky. Alternatively, we could go for Condemn. I actually like going for Condemn here. So I'm going to go for Condemn on this Restoration Angel. If our opponent does play a Spell Queller in that spot, then we can go untap and play Supreme Verdict. And it looks like our opponent is not going to play another creature on their turn, which is fine. I think we're okay with this spot, just passing. And I'm just going to hold the Vendilion Click. And now that our opponent has attacked, I think we should probably just play the Vendilion Click and threaten a block. See what's in our opponent's hand. But it looks like it could be a Spell Queller coming down. So that is what's going to come down here. So it's going to be a Spell Queller. And so now we have a decision. We can either path the Spell Queller, or we can untap and go for Supreme Verdict, hoping that our opponent doesn't have another Spell Queller, which I feel like our opponent probably doesn't have another Spell Queller in the spot, but it is possible. I'm going to take this. If our opponent does have another Spell Queller and we draw a land, we're also fine because we have a path. So I think we just go for the Verdict here. And now the Vendilion Click comes out from under that Spell Queller. We're able to cast it and see what our opponent is working with. So our opponent is actually playing Eldrazi Displacer. It's not super good, but I think we do take it. It's a spell. So I'm going to take that card away from our opponent. And now we're in a pretty commanding position. Having dealt with most of our opponent's early plays, here's a Flicker Wisp. So no clear targets for this that are particularly good. Looks like that same play of making one of our spreading seas fall off by exiling a land. So we have a choice of removal spells essentially. I can see arguments for any of them. I'm going to go with the Detention Sphere. If our opponent has a Restoration Angel, that would be worst case scenario, but looks like our opponent doesn't have a Resto Angel, so we're able to start the beatdown with that Ancestral Vision still waiting to come off Suspend and Double Path in hand, which just answers almost all of our opponent's creatures. So I don't mind using a path here to take out this Selfless Spirit. And we're slowly but surely taking control of the game. That Supreme Verdict was the turn where we really turned the corner. Now this Ancestral is going to draw some cards. And after that Ancestral resolves, things are looking pretty good. Pass for days, essentially. Any creature our opponent plays, we can path. Now our opponent's actually going for a Path to Exile on one of our creatures, which is a little bit interesting. So we could crack a Ghost Quarter for an island and try to bounce this Vendilion Click. I'm just going to let it resolve. I don't think we need to fight over this, essentially. And just wait for another threat to clock our opponent with. And there's one, but our opponent does have these Ghost Quarters, so the Celestial Colonnade, not a true threat in that sense. But something even like a Snapcaster Mage could be enough to close the deal here. So Reflector Mage, I don't think we need to Cryptic command that. So I'm just going to let that one resolve. We can always Path to Exile it or Supreme Verdict it. And yeah, I think we want to just go ahead and cast the Supreme Verdict and hold the pass. Because there's not really creatures that our opponent's playing that make multiple threats. So as far as I know, all of our opponent's creatures can be hit with a Path to Exile, and it's very unlikely that there's going to be multiple threats in play. So here's a Copter. I'm just going to Spell Snare this. Might as well make use of that Spell Snare while we have the chance. So as far as win conditions, we're looking for specifically one of the Planeswalkers, Snapcaster Mage, or that other Vendilion Click. But even any of our card draw spells can help us to get there. But we're in no rush. We still have this Cryptic command as insurance and multiple paths, so I think we're in a fantastic position in the game. It's just a matter of being patient in terms of closing it out. And you can see, looking at the deck, plenty of gas still left. And there's the Elspeth Suns champion. Perfect. So we can play that here. And hopefully it resolves and just completely wins us the game. Yep, it resolved. So we can tick up. And our opponent doesn't have much of a chance from this point. So going for a Ghost Quarter, that's perfectly fine. We still have basics left in our deck to search for. So I floated a mana in response to that Ghost Quarter, just in case our opponent had something they might want to play here that we would want a Cryptic command. So there's another Ghost Quarter. We're going to do the same play, float a mana, and then search for the last island, last basic in our deck. So now we actually do have all of our basics in play. And that's why with the Flooded Strands, I was going for Hallowed Fountain, so that now we could search out the basics when our opponent went for the Ghost Quarters. So there's a Smuggler's Copter. Really don't care about that. And Elspeth is just going to do its thing here. Snapcaster Mage is even more insurance. So even if our opponent does have something like a Restoration Angel here, shouldn't really matter. And our opponent's main phasing a Spell Queller. I'm just going to Cryptic command that because, well, why not, basically. Could also play Snapcaster, but that's going to be the match.